Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo. Let's go Buffalo.
Welcome to the Mafia Minute, where the only things you're torn between is your love of the Buffalo Bills and your love of chicken wings, and maybe Natalie and Bruglia. Depends on the day. I'm Magnum here with Jamie and G to talk all things Buffalo Bills. Thanks again for checking out the Mafia Minute. We're presented by Season Gap Fantasy Football. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, on social media at SeasonGapFF.com. Find us on the internet at MafiaMinute.com. Simple, easy to remember, nothing to it, just like the flaps. Follow, like, and please subscribe. All we ask, if you had fun, please hit the thumb. Jamie G, how are thee? On the close to eve of the NFL draft, we're still a little bit away, but you know, the tension is building. We had to get this out there. It's time.
It's definitely building, and I'm doing fantastic. I'm so excited. We are on the precipice of the draft, and this is one of my favorite times of the offseason. I absolutely love it. As a Bills fan, we're excited. We've gone through kind of the tough parts, I think, of the offseason here. And I think we're ready to get some fresh talent, some new news, and some good folks in the building. And the draft is the perfect time to do that. We know we've got to hit this year's draft. And so with that comes a lot of excitement. We're here, man. I'm pumped, and I'm ready to do this thing. Go Bills, baby. Let's go.
It's the Spider-Man year for the Bills. With great power comes great responsibility, right? And it's appropriate we're here. They have kicked off the voluntary offseason program. All that good stuff, and maybe a little bit of good stuff, depends on whether or not you want to shoot the messenger. But Tom Brady named Josh Allen as the next quarterback to win his first Super Bowl. Jamie G, what do you think about this, and how do you feel about maybe having to say something nice about Tom Brady's opinion?
You know, it's a lot better saying it now that he's a year plus out of the league.
As he's teasing a possible return.
As he's teasing a possible return, that's fine. I don't disagree with him, obviously, but I think even if you remove yourself from the situation, I think he's right. And, you know, he does spend some time playing golf and stuff around Josh Allen. I do think Tom Brady has a good eye for the game in terms of who's a really good player and also who has the intangibles. So it kills me to say something nice about him, but thank you, Tom Brady. We'll take it. And I hope to God you're right, and I hope it's this year.
Wouldn't it just be such a weird, like, Michael Jordan parallel if Tom Brady, for some reason, just chose to return to the Patriots and just toiled for 2 years, winning like 4 or 5 games a year, and just that's how his career ended? Wouldn't that just, I don't know if it would be kind of fitting or not, or, you know, we already did Natalie and Bruglia. Maybe we just bring Alanis Morissette in here and say, wouldn't that be ironic, don't you think?
A little bit.
Maybe a little too ironic.
I don't see it happening. I don't see the guy coming back to play just for the sake of doing it. I think that it's a situation where
there are betting odds, and they say the Raiders, but that's a little bit because of the ownership thing. And like he referenced Jordan playing with the Wizards,
which he did say he doesn't think they'll let him. So I don't see it happening.
I think Jordan actually technically had to sell his shares in the Wizards, but it was through I believe like somebody it was always kind of like a wink deal. I think where like he was always going to sell it back to Jordan at whatever price or whatnot. So. Yeah, if you're in the club, you're in the club, and they will make exceptions for you. In maybe it's not the club, but it's the inner circle. Let me ask you, Jamie, do you think Von Miller is in the inner circle? Because he said that Brandon Beane is going to trade up for a wide receiver. He sounded pretty sure about it. Give me a little bit of the BS scale here. Is it's on a scale of 0 to 100% true to 100%? It's 0% true. I know that's confusing, but they're inversely related. On the bullshit scale, Jamie G, how much BS is this?
60% of the time, it works 100% of the time. Mills, this is one where it's a typical Jamie G, or it's a little column A, it's a little column B, and here's why. Yes, I think Von Miller is not necessarily has access to what's going on in the front office, but he does aspire to be a future GM. And Brandon Beane last year took him to the NFL Combine, kind of putting him under his wing a little bit. And I think Von Miller really appreciates that and appreciates the opportunity to be with the Bills, hence the pay cut this year. So I do think he is, maybe more knowledgeable than some players, just because I think he is trying to be a GM. And I think Brandon, it wouldn't surprise me if maybe he plays, wins a Super Bowl with the Bills, retires and becomes the assistant GM. And for the Bills, I think that would be awesome. But I don't necessarily know that he's got, Brandon Beane is not one to advertise, dude. He's old school. He keeps his mouth shut. Don't say anything. That's kind of his MO. So I'm calling a little bit of BS here. But look, if you're betting, I think it's a good bet because it's pretty obvious the Bills want to get a good.
50-50. You're saying it's a halfway on the scale.
It's a 50-50. It's a coin flip.
Legitimately the middle of the scale there. You are just
it's
straddling.
You're
straddling, son, and not everyone likes when you put the straddle on, dude. Like, you have to ask permission before you put the straddle on. Because some people are going to be really into the blind straddle, and other people are not going to be into it. So it all depends on what the house rules are. Always ask the house rules before you go with a straddle. Just a
solid advice
there, which is technically poker advice, but we're not here to do poker. We're here to do the draft. So we're going to start out with a little draft prediction contest. We'll come back after the draft, see how we did, but we figured this would be a fun way to dip our toes into the water, so to speak. Jamie G, right now the Buffalo Bills have 10 draft picks. First question was, how many will they end up making? You said 7. I said 8. Let me ask you, do you think it's because they're moving up or because they're moving some of those picks into 2025? Or let me guess, a little of column A and a little of column B?
I hate to do it to you, Mills, but I'm going to. I do think it is a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B. I think that Brandon Beane ultimately will likely trade away that second that he got from Minnesota for next year up into this draft. But I do think that somewhere along the draft, he'll make another trade that will give him more compensation for next year as well. I don't know that it'll be a second, but I do see a little flip-flopping going on in terms of this year and next year. In all honesty, I don't know that 10 guys can make the roster. I know a lot of people think that the Bills are like bare bone and going to step out there with nobody on their team or whatever, but there's still a lot of good people on this roster. There's still a lot of veterans. So to me, I think 7 was the perfect number. Maybe 8. You pick up some core special teams guys.
So if we spread it out, you would call it 6 to 9. Shout out Bill and Ted. And you alluded to it. You said the Bills will trade away that second-round pick they got next year from Minnesota. The next question is, will the Bills trade away any top 100 draft picks from their 2025 arsenal? That basically means their top 3 draft picks next year in the first 3 rounds. That Minnesota second, you said yes. I said yes, so we're in agreement there. Third question is, currently the Bills are picking 28 in round 1. Will they stay there or move up or move down? We both said move up. My second pick would be stay. My third would be move down, although I might advocate for moving down, but it depends on the board. How far do you think they're moving up? Let me ask you that.
I don't think that it's going to be in the top 10 like everyone wants it to be. Don't get me wrong. If they can find a way...
Under over pick 20.
See, I really like them moving up. Like, what we've seen Brandon Beane do a lot of is move up 3 to 4 spots to get a guy who's fallen. I probably see that more than I see them moving up into above the top 20.
So later than 20, you'd call it. If it was before or after 20, I guess is better than under or over. But
yeah, I'm going to say after.
That makes sense because you could probably do that with maybe your 4th round pick or 2 5ths or 5th and 2 6ths or something like that. A little bit of a combo meal platter where anything else is probably going to require you to at least dip into that 2025 third, if not one of those seconds. And because you don't have a third this year, you still might want to have some of that ammo available later. So I think that's probably a good call. Next question is, what position will the first player drafted by the Bills play? Jamie G, you said wide receiver. I said defensive lineman. I think that's fair. Do you think there's any chance it's a position other than the defensive line, pass rusher, or, wide receiver?
If somehow, some way, Kool-Aid, McKinstry, if he slips, if the top corner in this draft slips to them and is there at, say, 22, 23, I would be shocked if they didn't trade up and draft the top-rated corner. If they can get the top corner in this draft there, I think they do it. That is not a problem that's going away at the end of this season. They want to replenish that. I mean, they lost a lot of talent at corner. They lost some depth. I think they want to replenish that as much as they can. That wouldn't surprise me at all. But a defensive line also wouldn't surprise me. Outside of that, I would say corner. I think taking a safety in round 1's too rich for what the Bills
corner,
need right now.
You want a premium position. Corner is another one of those premium positions. And while you have some good options on your team right now, you don't have someone who profiles as a long-term kind of franchise shutdown corner type. And Kool-Aid could be that. He's one of those dudes. Wouldn't surprise me if he went 15th. Wouldn't surprise me if he went 45th. He's all over the place in mock drafts. It's really tough to get a feel on his true value because of the injury, especially. So I think that could be a good pick, but also that could be a spot if the Bills wanted to go there. Maybe they gamble a little bit, try to trade down, into the very end of round 1, top half of round 2, make it happen. And Jamie G, next question. Will the Bills trade away any player currently on their roster during the draft? We both said no. Just doesn't seem like there's a viable candidate right now.
I don't think so, and I don't think there's anybody of any real value that they want to get rid of. I think they've kind of made those cuts. You can't even
dump a contract. Like, you can't dump Dalton, you can't dump Knox or Von Miller if you wanted to now anyways, after you redid the deals. So
I just don't. I think that part of this offseason's over, to be honest with you. Now, anything can happen, but I don't see it happening.
Yeah, and the next question is, will the Bills trade for a current NFL player under contract during the draft? We both said no. My guess is the only way this happens is probably a wide receiver, right? And a big one.
I would
where
love
they might be
It's
giving
sexy. It's fun. You'd love to see like a DK Metcalf or a Brandon Ayuk. It's incredible to dream about that type of stuff. Honestly, though, I just don't see it happening. And I don't think that the juice is going to be worth the squeeze in terms of what you're going to have to give up, provided you have a draft class that's a generational wide receiver, perceived as a generational wide receiver draft class. I think there's enough. They're going to have to roll with some young guys. No question about it. They made some additions. They've got some vets in that room. But they're going to have to roll some young guys. And you know what's funny, though? Even if they did trade for one of those wide receivers, I still think they turn around and draft one in the first 1, 2, 3 rounds.
Yeah, I think that's a very fair take. Next is, in what round will the Bills draft their first wide receiver? You said first. I said second. I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
Yeah.
Question 8, in what round will the Bills draft their first offensive lineman? We both said the 5th. It feels like they'll go for depth there. I will say in the 4th round, there's a non-zero chance that you could fall into a guard or a center, depending on what you want to do with your interior offensive line there. You can sometimes find really high quality guys there in the 4th. So it wouldn't shock me, but it feels like with 3 5th-round picks, you're pulling the trigger on at least one depth offensive lineman piece there.
I think so, and I think that they'll probably find, some value there. Nice, big, kind of mauler type that fits their build, that's mobile. They got some, they drafted guard last year with Osiris Torrance. I think somebody that you can get into in the center position would be a really big add here. And like you said, sometimes you can get like the second or third best center in the draft in like rounds 3, 4, and 5. So if somehow, some way, the Powers, Jackson Johnson Powers kid falls, I'm seeing him mocked at the bottom of round 1, so I doubt it. But if somehow, some way he does, that wouldn't shock me either.
Yeah, the thing that sucks then is then you kind of want to go pass rusher in round 2, and that's really going to put some pressure to move up then for a wide receiver or address the position another way. We're not quite to that portion of the conversation yet. Next question, number 9. In what round will the Bills draft their first defensive lineman / pass rusher? You said 2. I said 1. I think that's, the inverse when we had a wide receiver. So we agree that those are the priorities. Next question, will the Bills draft more defensive players, offensive players, or a tie? We both went defense, but I think that makes sense, right? Because outside of wide receiver and maybe interior offensive line, it's more kind of adding on the edges, where the defense, you feel like you got to add multiple players on the defensive line. You probably need to add a depth corner and definitely somebody at safety probably. So it just feels like you're going to add more there.
Look at where they lost a lot of players that were impact players for them. Now, granted, they were aging veterans, but they lost a lot of impact players on the defensive side of the football. And not that they need to rebuild it all in one offseason, but I think adding key pieces there and having it tip that way. And let's be candid, a lot of times those guys are better special teamers too. And that's something they're going to have to, fill
special
some
teams
voids
count,
with.
man. It's a face of the game. Like, you need guys.
You have to. And I just think, between defensive line, between safety, between corner, between edge, and it wouldn't shock me to get some depth at linebacker that can play special teams too. I mean, those are all things that basically every level of the defense, they could add impact players and reserve players. So for me, this was an easy one in terms of defense for sure.
I think so. Question 12, will the Bills draft a specialist that's generally a kicker, punter, long snapper? We both said no. Will the Bills draft a quarterback? We both said no. And I think that for me, at least, that was because there's no guy that really seems intriguing that'll still be there in round 5, 6, or 7. Because I don't think you'd ever do it earlier than that.
A lot of people had the kid from Tennessee, Joe Milton or whatever,
He's got a big arm, but
there.
that's it. And just because he has a big arm, it doesn't make sense, really.
It doesn't. And, they've got themselves the veteran that they want there and Trubisky as a backup. I just think this isn't the year to do it, to be honest. But, I don't see it happening. Not this year.
Yeah, I'd honestly rather take a shot at another reclamation project. Like, if, say, Trey Lance or Zach Wilson were cut or something like that. Like, some kind of, all-tools guy, at least. Because for a third quarterback, that's kind of what you want, is all-ceiling guy. If he develops, awesome. You can turn him into something. If not, no harm, no foul.
Yeah, that's right.
Question 14, we're almost there. Will the Bills draft a running back? We both said yes. Just makes sense, right? 3 picks in the 5th round, 2 in the 6th. Feels like you get someone in there who can definitely, probably help contribute on special teams, be it, as in coverage or as a returner, and then develop behind as maybe a long-term backup to James Cook.
I think so. And, they've shown, Ty Johnson, even though I really like him, it's a 1-year deal. And they've shown that they like to have, a little bit of punch to go along with James Cook. It's James Cook's team, no doubt about it. But there's going to be, 8, 12, 13 snaps a game that goes someplace else. And I think that it makes sense to do. This is a weird draft where the third best running back could still be there in round 4 or 5. So maybe the top, you're going to get a top 5 running back within
serviceable running
round
backs
5
available in free agency too. So it's not a position of need, but if the good one falls.
Yeah. I could see him maybe making a move there. And again, you get another special team type player as well.
Like that. Final question. What up, Detroit? That's where the draft is being held. Jamie G, we asked, will the fans boo Roger Goodell when he comes out to announce the first pick? We both answered yes. I mean, the Bears are making the first pick, right? Unless they're trading out. Goodell would be getting booed anyways, let's be honest. Who's not booing Goodell? Maybe the Chiefs?
I mean, that would be it.
Almost every other team is booing
year.
Roger Goodell.
I'm going to bank that he is. That's just a...
And shout out Philly, we did it right when the draft first came here. And shout out Roger Goodell too. He just took it. He just basked it. All right, come on. Bring it. Sometimes negative energy can become good energy. It's energy conversion. It's a thing. Buy energy futures. So we will check back in on the results of those after the draft. For now, let's just kind of move on to a little round 1 discussion here. Right now, the Bills are scheduled to pick 28th overall, 28th pick in round 1. When you look at the latest mock drafts around the internet, ESPN has Adonai Mitchell going there, Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy off the board there, so is Chop Robinson. CBS had a bunch of mocks. They had Chop Robinson, trade down, Adonai Mitchell. Interesting because Chop Robinson was still on the board. They passed him up for Mitchell. Then Pro Football Focus had Troy Franklin going, and that's over Brian Thomas Jr., Chop Robinson, Xavier Worthy, and Leggett. So, yeah, kind of a lot there. And overall, if you look at Mock Database Central, the consensus pick is Adonai Mitchell. He's being mocked to the Bills in 39% of drafts. That's the most popular pick for any team outside of the top 10. Jamie G, thoughts on that? Does it feel kind of like fait accompli that it's Adonai Mitchell if you stay there, or would you rather take a chance on, say, Xavier Worthy if he was there, or is Chop Robinson your guy if all 3 are there?
I think if Chop Robinson falls, you'd be really hard-pressed to pass him up. I could only because I think probably...
Draft is way deeper at wide receiver than it is at pass rusher.
Way deeper at wide receiver, and you could probably trade back up into the first half of round 2. You got the draft capital to do it, and go ahead and pick up Xavier Leggett or
it's going to be way easier to move up from the end of the second to the mid-second than it is to move up in the first. You might not have to tap into any of that 2025 draft capital. Maybe you could even get it done with 2 5ths or something like that.
Yeah.
So I think that is probably a more realistic scenario.
And let me just say it right now, Mills. Bills fans, Bills Mafia, do not lose your mind if we take a pass rusher, Chop Robinson, or an impact player that the draft isn't super heavy on because they fell to us. It doesn't mean we're going to avoid Josh Allen and making him happy and putting a receiver. We're still going to get the receiver. Have a little faith. But if Chop Robinson falls, if all three are there, I personally like Brian Thomas Jr., but if all three are there, I think I would probably still take Chop Robinson and hope that I can trade up and get, one of the, Xavier Legette type players.
I would too. And honestly, I think the ideal scenario would almost be, all right, Chop Robinson falls. Go ahead, take him, and then, assuming Kansas City stays, call them up in 32 and offer your second and that Vikings second probably for that pick and like the last pick in the, I asked for the third round, but maybe I would take the fourth and try to go back up there then for, you might still be able to get Mitchell there, one of him,
Lad McConkey's probably there.
Legette's probably there. I think you have options there and you can do it without giving up a future first, and you have that extra second. Maybe I would try to deal my second, the Bills' future second before the Vikings, because I would assume that the Vikings pick will be the better draft pick to own because the Bills will be the better team in 2025. But I guess it's at least interesting, right? Would you rather them go and try to do that and trade back into the first round to get the fifth-year option, or would you rather them play it cool and try to pay less of a price to say move up into like the 10 to 15 range of the second round to get the wide receiver, even though you don't get the fifth-year option?
If there's a massive run, Mills, and I mean massive run,
that's what I'm worried about. Looking at these mock drafts, it feels like there could be a huge wide receiver run in the second round,
where it's like you almost might need to. I guess it's going to be one of those things where it's like, depending on the feel of draft night, you might have to. Like, I just worry that there could be a real big run here where maybe if you wait, I don't know that they can stay put and wait till pick 60. I think they got to move up to get the impact player that they want, either at the top of round, first half of round 2, or sneak back in the back half of round 1, or the last pick of round 1, which would be awesome.
As weird as it is, though, I think it's harder to trade up into that very beginning of round 2, because now that it's on the second day, teams have time to regroup overnight, and that pick becomes incredibly valuable. Like we saw last year, the Titans move up for Will Levis. So I think it's almost easier to try to go there at the end of round 1, where maybe teams are a little bit tired, the draft's been running for a long time. Maybe you can hammer out a little bit of value there or something like that. I think that's definitely in play, though. I think that's the way you have to be looking. It would kind of suck that if you don't pick again until, the mid to late 4th round, but that might be the price you have to pay to pick up 2 players who could be extremely useful to you. We basically talked about this already. Would you take another position other than defensive line or wide receiver? As I was looking around at mocks, I did see, you mentioned before, Jackson Powers-Johnson go to the Bills, Tyler Newman, the safety from Minnesota, and Chris Broswell, edge rusher from Alabama. I think all those are fine. Honestly, as much as it's nice, like, oh yeah, you get the highest rated, guard, center. I'm pretty sure he will play center in the NFL, but I don't know if that's the right spot from value. I mean, it's fine, but it feels like you're buying the floor a little bit there. So I think I would prefer to even go corner above center there. Any thoughts on that? If you're going to go, not D lineman or wide receiver.
No, I would way prefer. It's not. Corner is more of an impact. If the top corner in the draft falls to them,
corner is a blue chip position. Center is not, unfortunately. Neither
exactly.
is guard.
I won't be mad if they do that. If one of the top pass rushers falls to them, I will not be mad if they do that. Like, I won't be. I think that's fine. For a center, I probably will be like, dude, don't get me wrong. I absolutely am a proponent of building from the trenches. I just think that you could probably get that guy that you can plug in round 3 or 4.
Well, and honestly, the fifth-year option matters less for the center, right? Because they cost less generally. So it's not as big of an advantage to hold that fifth-year option as it would be in another position. Top center is going to, I don't know, can you recall like 17 million? Top corner is going to be pushing 30 million. Kind of. Yeah. It's just better value. Same thing with safety, right? Like if you want to take a safety, go ahead, trade back into round 2. It won't destroy you unless there's no like Kyle Hamilton type here. Someone I would feel, that confident in going there. How about kind of the rookie wide receiver scenarios? Let me put it to you this way. Would you rather trade up for Brian Thomas Jr., stay put for, say, Xavier Worthy or Donnie Mitchell, or trade down for somebody like Xavier Legette, Keon Coleman, Lad McConkey, or whoever else you want? Which of those 3 scenarios is the most appealing?
It's weird because I just don't know how big of a gap there's going to be from, say, a Brian Thomas Jr. to an Adonai Mitchell or an Xavier Worthy to then an Xavier Lad McConkey. I don't know that it's going to be that big of a gap.
I mean, I have the Bills tier, but it's
if the Bills feel like it's not that big of a tier, then I probably
how about
would
Worthy?
opt to
I think
trade
he
down.
is the one that's the weird. Like, how do you feel about Worthy? Because he is a slight prospect. He's all speed. I get John Ross flashes, so I worry about him.
It scares me.
Do you prefer Thomas and Mitchell over Worthy? Definitely.
I prefer Thomas and Mitchell over Worthy. I prefer, Lad McConkey and Xavier Legette over Worthy. Worthy's probably my least favorite of the bunch. I get the speed. I worry about the size, and I just think that that's a pure Bob type player, boom or bust.
Yeah, he seems like more of a finishing piece, as an addition of speed, whereas you're looking for like a foundational wide receiver one type. And I think Adonai Mitchell is a little bit underrated in that. I mean, just looking at the boxes, he really checks so many of them. It's kind of amazing he flew under the radar as much as he did. But Brian Thomas Jr. has that immediate kind of, somewhere across between Mike Evans and DK Metcalf a little bit. I mean, that's exactly the kind of receiver you have lacked. And if he falls, that's the thing, right? If he falls into the 20-plus range, that's probably where you have to make that decision, right? As weird as it is, if you stay put, I think you take Chop Robinson, but if you're going to move up to like 20, I think it would be for Brian Thomas.
Yeah,
that makes sense.
I think that makes sense. I mean, especially if they feel like he's going to be the game-changing piece, then I guess it's worth it. And then you turn around in round 2 and you take, maybe say Chris Jenkins or Tavondre Sweat or something like that if you can get him. I think that's probably your best bet. And then you plug 2 really solid. You're not going to be able to fill them all, but you plug 2 really solid holes in terms of needing immediate impact players on the defensive line and at wide receiver. Chop Robinson, I think edge might be more. It's not more important, but there is Ed Oliver and Daquan Jones there, but they really do need some depth. Sean McDermott plays 2 defensive lines throughout the game, so they really do need some depth there at defensive tackle as well. So
yeah, there's just no way around it. You just need more everything on the defensive line, really. You just more of it, please, as much as you do at wide receiver. It just seems like it's easier to find at least bodies at wide receiver. Maybe not high-end bodies, but at least kind of like functional depth, so to speak. As of right now, no third-round pick, so the only other top 100 pick you have is the 28th pick in the second round. That's the 60th overall pick. As far as the latest mock drafts I've seen, as the bigger ones, Cole Bishop, the safety from Utah, is going on the ESPN mock. Brad Dorius, the defensive tackle from Oregon, is in the Pro Football Focus draft. And as far as over on mock draft database, the consensus pick right now for the Bills in the second round is Christian Hayes, a guard/center from UConn. Looking around other mocks, I saw, this is the name here, Kieran Amajidi, offensive tackle from Yale. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Jonah Ellis, edge rusher from Utah. Troy Franklin, the wide receiver from Oregon. Xavier Legette, wide receiver from South Carolina. And Kalen Bullock, the safety from USC. And I mean, the one thing is, as nice as it would be to get Chop Robinson in the first round, if you don't take a wide receiver in the first round, everybody and their mother knows you're going to need one, right? So will that make it harder to trade up? That's the one real drawback, is the actual GM just extracting an extra price, knowing that the Bills are going to feel very pressured to make a move.
Yeah, yes. I mean, but at the same time, I don't think that they will let that dictate what they do. I just think that they're gonna, You
can't really. It's like being pot committed in a poker game. You can't. If you're going to be pot committed, you have to think you're going to take down that pot, and the Bills aren't going to win that bet, especially with the way this second round is playing out. I just don't think, teams are going to try to extract their, pound of gold, basically. Pound of flesh, I should say.
I don't know that the Bills are going to be I don't know. It'll be interesting to see how it shakes out. Brandon Beane is not really ever reached
overall, because I'm not a big fan of the Oregon wide receivers, man. There's been a lot of busts over there. They're kind of up there with the Baylor wide receivers a little bit over the past few years. There's been a lot of prospects, but it's hard for me to, find prospects that have really worked out. So that scares me a little bit. I've seen them mock there a fair amount.
You like the prototypical size, speed, Good production. Obviously playing with Bo Nix, who will probably be a first or high second round draft pick. I like him. He's not, I think I'd probably take Xavier Legette in that same tier over him. Maybe even Ladd McConkey. Ladd's the most interesting prospect in this because he doesn't have necessarily anything that like jumps off the charts, but could he have
he's
an
one
Ed
of
McCaffrey
those
type career? Like maybe. Like
well,
that's
you
how
don't want to
crazy
say
he
like,
is.
Cooper Kupp or whatever, but he does everything well, even if he's not absolutely elite at one thing. But a lot of times in the NFL, everyone's trying to look for these elite traits. Right now, it's kind of in baseball how you grade guys on the 80 scale, and you always want to look for elite traits, whether it's power or arm or whatever. You want to see at least one elite trait. But if you have all above average traits, again, it's kind of like you want stars and scrubs. You want a little bit of a balance thing here. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. Just maybe the fact that he might be miscast as a wide receiver 1. So what, right? Then Dalton Kincaid might have to be your wide receiver 1 for the year. That might just be the way it works. That might be a little bit by design, maybe. When they kept Knox, maybe maybe Kincaid just plays split out, 80% of the time or something, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, dude, Kincaid has what it takes to be the number 1 receiving weapon on the Bills team, no matter what they do at wide receiver.
Then it changes because then you need more wide receivers that complement him. So then maybe it makes a little bit different. Maybe you want a little bit more just straight speed or something like that. So I guess a little bit depends on the offensive approach, which they'll probably have to tweak depending on which way they go. So let's say they draft a wide receiver in the first round. Let's just take it off the board. In the second round, are you going just true best player available? Or are you prioritizing the D-line or maybe safety or, interior offensive line? If you go wide receiver in round 1, where do you want to go in round 2?
I really want to go on the defensive side of the ball here. And, I really like Chris Jenkins at defensive tackle. I think he could come in, get in the rotation, make an impact. T'Vondre Sweat, if he's there, those are my 2 players I really like at defensive tackle. But I also think if they, if you mention it, man, if one of the corners or safety slips, they have 2 starting safeties this year, but they're both kind of in short term. And last year, at times they used 3 safeties. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them value that position. I'm excited about Mike Edwards joining the Bills as a safety. So for me, it's like, I wouldn't mind if they wait a little bit, but if the top safety is sitting there in round 2, I wouldn't, or top 3 safety sitting there, I wouldn't be super opposed to that either. But I definitely want him to go on the defense side of the ball, preferably the interior of the defensive line.
I think that's a good call. And again, it's a little tough to know what they're going to do here because so much will depend on A, which way they go in round 1, and then B, just how the rest of the board falls. I mean, the Bills have to be some of the biggest fans of people going nuts for Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix, right? Because if nothing else, that'll change teams' plans. Even if it's only 2 picks, sometimes the ripple effect will just be a big thing. So it's kind of hard to figure out here, but I think it's safe to say in the optimal draft, the Bills are walking out of the first 2 rounds with a defensive lineman and a wide receiver, kind of, right? Like, not to put too fine a point on it.
I hope so. I mean, I think if they do that, they're in good shape. If they walk out, though, with a starting caliber defensive back and a wide receiver, I think I'm okay with that. But
does a wide receiver have to be in the mix? Could it be if they got a safety and a D lineman or a D lineman in a center? Then what happens if they do that? Because we still need to talk about the rest of the draft. Say they did that because it worked out that way beautifully. They get a starter at defensive line, starter at center or what have you, or safety. Then how many wide receivers do they draft in rounds 4 through 7 if they're doing that? 3 or 4?
Probably 2. I don't know that they
gotta throw darts. If you didn't take any with your first 2 picks, then I think you got to throw some darts.
Yeah, you probably do, but this is a deep draft, and who knows where the Keon Colemans of the world fall? Who knows where the Giovanni's? Like, there's a lot of players here.
Yes, I don't think Walker or Coleman or fall out of round. That's what I was half joking. I've said tonight as we've done something. I've seen 20 wide receivers drafted in round 2, but there are a lot of guys that could go there, but they could go to round 4. It's just interesting that the Bills don't have that 3rd round pick. They were hoping to get the compensatory pick, and that didn't work out. And it kind of screwed them a little bit here because that would be huge to have that 3rd round pick. It would just give you just that little bit of
Well,
flexibility.
they got done dirty with it. Let's just call it what it is. But
Yeah,
they
no,
do
I'm
have
not
the,
arguing
they
with
do
you.
have the arsenal to trade up into the third. So I mean, I think
Yeah,
that
it would
that's
just
at
be nice
least
to have that third in addition, you know,
for sure.
instead of that late fourth compensatory. It just would have given you just that. That's kind of the sweet spot for the center of the safety, I think. You know what I mean? I think that would give you that flexibility.
It's criminal that they got robbed. That's just mind blowing, and they were very out
Yeah, I don't
open
like
about
that they
that
don't
too.
reveal the formula for the compensatory picks or whatever, that it's their own special sauce or whatever. You know, if you were evaluating companies' financials and you ask them, you know, and they're like, well, how do you know, why you grade your stuff or whatever? Oh, like, we can't tell you, that's proprietary. That's red flag number one.
Yes,
As
it
far
is.
as the rest of the draft here, what do you want them to do? You mentioned it before. They can't necessarily roster 10 players. It sounds like, yeah, we would like to, you know, move up, maybe be it to get into that third round or a second round pick or whatever. But they can't really spend 8 picks between round 4 and 7, right? So do you want them to try to trade up, maybe get more picks in that round 4, round 5 range, or move back into 2025? Like do something like trade a 4th and a 5th this year for a 3rd next year and a 6th this year, or something like that. How would you like them to address it? Because you are going to continue to need to have extra draft capital going on to, you know, afford to have your good players that you pay good money to.
Yeah, I think I'd like to see them use what they got to do to get up into, you know, the third this year, and then if they can slide back or get rid of, you know, slide back. Maybe they've got a couple of 4s, couple of 5. Maybe if they slide back with some of those, they can stockpile some picks for next year. I think that's always smart too. But I think no question, I want some impact players this year, particularly depending on how the board falls to me.
I think that's a good way to approach it. And the one thing I will say is if you look at the Bills draft history since they drafted Josh Allen, they've been pretty good on day 3 of drafting 2 positions. Wide receiver in the secondary. At wide receiver, they've gotten Gabe Davis, 4th round 2020, Khalil Shakir, 5th round 2022, Isaiah Hodgins, 6th round 2020. Again, didn't make it with the Bills, but has been somewhat successful with the Giants. Justin Shorter last year, 5th round, kind of a TBD. But then in the secondary, you've had Dane Jackson, 7th round 2020, DeMar Hamlin, 6th round 2021, Christian Beneford, 6th round 2022. You picked up Tyler Bass, probably the other notable guy, 6th round 2020. But does that make you, I guess, a little bit more confident maybe in if you had to wait on wide receiver or safety, knowing that the Bills have at least had somewhat success here at drafting those 2 positions, because they have not been terribly successful in the later rounds at other positions? That's not uncommon. It's very hard to get hits in the, you know, day 3, 4th round or later picks. But does at least, if you didn't get a wide receiver in the first 2 rounds, and you at least look at this list and like, all right, you know, have the faith in Brandon Beane or whatever?
I think so. I mean, you got to understand that you might not get the immediate impact starter that we're all hoping for.
Yeah, none of those were, you know, day 1.
They're not going to be like day 1. I mean, I think they knew early on that there was a lot of potential there with Gabe Davis and Shakir for that matter. I mean, they made the team when other players that you mentioned didn't, and went on to produce at other teams. So, you know, and you mentioned Justin Shorter. He's some Bills fan think he's going to be the next DK Metcalf. Some think he'll be a bust. He was hurt last year. It'll be really interesting to see what they do. I think it will also depend on how much confidence they have in Khalil Shakir, Justin Shorter, some of the new guys they brought in. So the cupboard's not totally bare, but I think it'll be the hardest thing, Mills, about that will just be the mental hurdle of, oh man, we didn't get our number 1. Well, maybe that's okay. You know, we'll kind of have to see what they do and how it shakes out. I do know one thing. I do think they will take the best players that are there with the value. Beane has shown tremendous discipline, man, when it comes to making draft picks. So to me, I gotta have some confidence in that.
I will give him credit. Finding Dane Jackson in the 7th and Christian Beneford in the 6th, it's hard to find corners deep that aren't just pure special teams contributors. I know both of those guys have contributed on special teams, but both played meaningful snaps on defense and were at least useful.
Well, dude, at one point, Christian Benford was our number 1 last year. I mean, and even when Rasul Douglas came in, he still was kind of the 1B to the 1A there. So, I mean, that was a really good
That's
pick.
an elite position. We were talking about that before, and it's hard to find those later in the draft. So it's kind of impressive that he's actually been able to pull them off. And I'd say overall, kind of what does a successful day 3 for the Bills draft look like? Is it drafting players at a specific position? Is it just best player available? Try to pick up future draft capital. I know you want to say a little bit of all of the above, but try to give me at least something a little more specific as far as what would make day 3 a success for the Bills in the draft.
I think if they take 4 or 5 picks on day 3 and all of them make the team, that's a real success. And I think if you can find some special teams contributors, maybe somebody that can play in a rotational piece, either on the defensive line or at safety or on the offensive line, or a wide receiver or running back or something like that can make an impact. Definitely special teams, but if somebody can make an impact, I think that's a win. This is a good roster. They're a playoff team. They've won the division 4 times in a row. If they draft 3, 4, 5 guys on day 3 and all of them make the team, that's a huge success in my opinion.
Yeah, I would say getting 75% of your day 3 picks on the team is success. So if they can get them all on there, I think that's very good. Let's finish up with just a mock draft. We're not going to do the whole thing. We're just going to do the Bills' first 2 picks. That's pick 28 in the first round, pick 28 in the second round, 60th overall, no trading. Jamie G, I'm going with Chop Robinson falling to you in round 1, and then staying put in round 2 there, taking Ricky Parasol, the wide receiver from Florida. Jamie G, do it for me. Mock draft, first 2 picks for the Bills, no trade.
Yeah, no trade here, man. I went ahead and did it. There was a big time run on wide receivers, and I just thought, you know what, this is the best guy for our squad. I took Xavier Legette right there at 28. All the other players we talked about were off the board. We just felt like that was the best pick. And then at round 2, I stayed put at pick 60, and my guy from Michigan, Chris Jenkins, fell to me, and I went ahead and took Chris Jenkins at pick 60. Doing so, I think you get 2 immediate impact starters that could be perennial, cornerstones on both sides of the football here. If they came out of the draft like that without having to give up any capital, and that's what they walked away with, I think I could be really happy with that. And Chris Jenkins is partial to me because his father was a Jet, and I had to watch him, destroy the offensive line of the Buffalo Bills for many, many years. So excited about both those 2 picks, Mills.
There's always an ulterior motive. Overall, I'm very excited for the draft, for the Bills and just overall to watch it. Damn you, NFL, just keeping us interested all the time. We just keep getting sucked in and out and whatever. It just keeps happening, and we keep showing up and watching it.
Well, they've gone totally from suck to blow, and they just continue.
They've gone to plaid, dude. The NFL went to plaid about 4 years ago. Like when they pulled off the COVID shit, they went to plaid, and they've just been. They're still in plaid. Every other sports league is just like looking up at the plaid, like, yo, how do we catch up? So far, the only person who's made any ground is Caitlin Clark, so we'll see how that goes.
Yeah, it's true.
If it keeps going that way, maybe she'll replace Dak Prescott as the quarterback for the Cowboys. Will it happen? I don't know. You should stay tuned and find out. This has been the Mafia Minute presented by Seize the Gap Fantasy Football. Thanks again for checking us out. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, on YouTube, on social media at Seize the Gap FF. Thank you for remembering that. We're at MafiaMinute.com. Thank you for remembering that. And thank you for remembering the flaps. Follow, like, and please subscribe. We will be back right after the draft to review the draft, to talk about all things draft, probably even boo Roger Goodell after the fact. Jamie G, I'm booing Roger Goodell. I'm not saying boo Earns, but I'm guessing you're saying go Bills or something like that.
I'm saying, hey, go Bills. We'll see you after the draft to break down the entirety of the Bills draft, talk about it, be excited, enjoy the OTA notes. The whole team was in the building today. It's a great time to be a Bills fan. Go Bills.